Good morning and welcome back to the Morning Minute. It has been a minute since I've done a Morning Minute. But in today's episode, I am going to be sharing all about my home buying experience. The good, the bad, and the financials behind buying my first home as a single, self-employed woman and mother. One of my many goals with this YouTube channel is to share realistic and relatable financial tips, insights, and experiences. So let's go back in time because I don't think it's possible to really take in a home buying experience without understanding where financial freedom for women came from. The ECOA Act was enacted on the 28th day of October in 1974. Just a few short months before my sister was born, which is crazy. It was not long in our history when women were extremely discriminated against when it comes to financial independence. The ECOA Act, or the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, makes it unlawful for any creditor to discriminate against any applicant with respect to any aspect of credit. This means that the law prohibits creditors from discriminating against credit applicants on the basis of race, color, religion, national origin, sex, marital status, age, because an applicant receives income from a public assistance program, or because an applicant has in good faith exercised any right under the Consumer Credit Protection. So, of course, like with any massive societal change, there are still people who believe in the illegal and past forms of behavior. I found my realtor through Instagram. After the first realtor I was referred to crashed into my car while driving her husband's pickup truck with a towing hitch on it that should have been removed with the trailer and failed to take responsibility. I'll insert some pictures on the screen, or if you follow me on Instagram, I'm sure you've seen them there because it was a big to-do, big hassle. But obviously, I was on the hunt for a new realtor after fighting with the insurance companies for months and getting in and out of rental cars while the extensive repairs to my vehicle were being completed. I came across her profile on Instagram and decided to reach out. She was friendly and sent me some options, but nothing that really stuck out to me or was what I was actually looking for. Being self-employed, I had a longer closing date because I needed to wait for my tax returns. And I started looking in November, and I couldn't file until the new year came. So that was a little bit of a challenge. I also didn't want to pay for a home that was already remodeled just to go in and remodel it again. Typically, when you get into a home that is already quote-unquote remodeled, it's designed in a way that is appealing to the most amount of buyers, which is typically pretty boring, grays, whites, neutrals. I like to have a little bit of character, a little bit of color, a little bit more fun, and I just didn't want to pay extra for something that I was going to have to pay on top of to change or remove or edit. And here in Maine, it is a struggle to find tradesmen or handymen who can do a job right in a way that actually looks nice. There is a lot of rigging things together or putting lipstick on a pig just to get by. So when I was looking for a home, I was looking at things like the quality of work, inspecting the disclosures for the last replacements of things, such as windows, roof, heating and cooling, the basement condition. We have basements here. Sometimes they can retain water. And the well system, if there was one, like all of those big ticket items. I was really looking at the disclosures of when they were last serviced or when they were last replaced. Just kind of all of the major stuff, because the cosmetic things I can do myself, and they add so much value to your home with just a simple, affordable project. Like painting, removing some wallpaper, maybe refinishing a floor, that kind of stuff. So before we found a home I loved, she referred me to a mortgage broker. His name was Josh, who at the time was working for a company called Cross Country Mortgage. And it looks like he is no longer working there and has since been fired or changed employers. So I connected with Josh and moved forward with getting a new pre-approval since my previous one was expired, and went through the mortgage application process. During this time, Josh was really vague and actually really negative. His team was extremely rude and unprofessional. They didn't really seem to know what they needed from me or what they were asking for in terms of like the documentation required for processing the loan. I used to be in the mortgage industry. I spent a lot of my career in business development, and that led me to implementing mortgage efficiency programs in places like credit unions and mortgage brokerages. This is why I have my MLO ID number and my mortgage training program available on my website as a service that I offer. So I gathered what documentation is typically required for a mortgage and went ahead and just sent that over to them. But everything somehow seemed to be an issue. The documentation was wrong, dates were wrong, my financial reports from my company were allegedly wrong, my credit was wrong. It all just seemed wrong and bad or incorrect to them somehow, or not enough for some reason that they left vague and unexplained. It was the most challenging, to say the least, to try to work with them. This lender then went ahead and repeatedly pulled my credit and demanded that things be removed from my credit report that were paid off years ago, and then currently showed as closed. But due to the Fair Credit Reporting Act, which is a federal piece of legislation enacted to promote the accuracy, fairness, and privacy of consumer information contained in the files of consumer reporting agencies, that couldn't really be done. And he, as a professional mortgage loan officer, definitely should have known that. If a collection is paid, it reports as paid for a number of years. Then, like all things, it will eventually fall off. And you can, however, remove a collection if there is fraud or a lack of data required for the collection to be valid. But if you pay things off, like in my instance, a final utility bill from a previous place that I lived, I never received it and I didn't know about it. And they sent it to collection. I have Credit Karma, which is a credit monitoring service. It's a free app. If you don't have it, I highly recommend that you do download it. It is now owned by Intuit, which is a part of the QuickBooks family. But it is free, and I paid off this collection as soon as I got the alert from Credit Karma that I had a new collection on my report, and the company then went ahead and reported it as paid/closed, which is normal. That's what they should do. It was showing a zero balance. It was showing that the account was closed and that the amount of collection was paid. They did not remove it because removing a paid collection kind of goes against those fair credit reporting guidelines. You can sometimes do a pay for deletion, which is you can reach out to the creditor and send them a letter asking them to agree to the terms of doing a pay for delete. But a lot of companies will not do that just because it goes against the Fair Credit Reporting Act. So as more time went on and more of the challenges and unprofessional communications went on between me and this lender, I started to feel really nervous at this point. I did not think that this team was going to be able to get this loan across the finish line. They just really seemed like they were undertrained and lacked the knowledge required to do their jobs in an efficient way. And all that could be told by how they handled my experience. I spoke with my realtor about the issues that I was having with the lender, and she advised me that we were so close, and we were, and to just keep my spirits high and push through. So that's what I did. I put my feelings aside. I tried to keep my emotions out of it, and I just tried to get this loan over with and to move into the home. Which is not, I don't think that's how you should feel when you're going through this major life milestone. Of course, things like buying a house or any big financial move is scary and unnerving, and it's a long process, and it's very invasive to, your privacy. You feel very vulnerable and exposed. But I don't think things like this, financial things, are so taboo and stigmatized. I just don't think that they need to be a miserable experience. I wish more people could have a better time buying a home than I did, for sure. And when I was working in the mortgage industry, that was my goal, was to make this experience as efficient and as seamless as possible to reduce the stress on the buyers and the sellers, because it is a deterrent. I know a lot of people who don't own homes because they just don't want to go through the process. So from there, Josh, this mortgage loan officer, started saying things to me like, this is why I don't like working with women. If you were married, this would be so much easier because I wouldn't have to even deal with you, and so on and so on. I tried to get the mortgage team what they were asking for, but a lot of it was just impossible, or they were asking for things that didn't really even exist. The bulk of the discriminatory language came after they asked me for my divorce decree. I personally do not have a divorce decree because those are given after somebody would be divorced. And I have never been divorced because I have never been married. Newsflash, you can be a mother without ever being married. I know that's a shocker to a lot of people, but it is possible, physically. So I have my son, I have myself, I have my company, but I'm not married, and I've never been married, so I have never been divorced. And I really noticed a huge shift in the discriminatory language after that statement was out there that I had never been married. So after that, I was sent my loan estimate, and I noticed my income was extremely discounted. When I asked Josh about why he did this or why my income was coming in so low, he said it was because I was a woman in my childbearing years, and when I do get married, when I do get married and have another child, I would have a drop in my income or extra expenses such as increased bills, childcare, etc. He said he lowered my income to make up for any of my earning fluctuations I have as a woman. Even though my income has only doubled or tripled since pivoting my business in 2018, this is extremely illegal and discriminatory behavior. As first of all, I don't plan on having any more children. I got it right the first time. My son is perfect and I love him so much. And at this point, he's already 6 years old. I'm 34. I don't want to have another kid. I just want to love him the most. And I know that might sound selfish, but I want to love him the most. I don't want to love anybody else. He keeps me busy enough. But just because I am within the age of adding to my family, it just doesn't mean that I can or I will. It was a major struggle for me to even conceive my son, and he came after a lot of years of loss. So for him to make those assumptions on my body and my life and my ability to bear children in a way that negatively affected the way I was able to care for the child that I already currently have, meaning buying a home and putting a roof over his head, it was extremely hurtful and to me, and I was infuriated. I was like beyond raging, borderline stroke. I was so mad, and it was devastating to be treated like that. It was horrible. So like I mentioned, home buying is always going to be an anxious or stressful time, regardless of anybody's personal situation. Moving is hard. The adjustment is hard. Sorting through your belongings and adding kids to the mix, it's all just hard. But this stress and unfairness from this lender really made the process so much worse. I was dealing with a dangerous property manager at my rental, a tight timeline, and I was already half packed. So I again called my realtor, and with her anxious to close, we hopped on another call with the lender, and he said that everything was going to be fine, that his team was still wrapping things up, and that they were processing the loan, even though they had all of my info for months, and it eventually went into underwriting. Typically, if the loan officer and the processor are competent in their duties, underwriting should be really easy. Like putting the candles on a birthday cake. They are just tying the bow, dotting the I's, crossing the T's, and just basically prepping everything to close. So the cake is done and baked and covered in icing. It just needs the finishing touches. So once the loan was in underwriting, I was just waiting on a confirmed closing date because the only date that I had at that time was tentative to the closing company, which would be the title company. It was a relief, and I was living a little bit easier then, knowing that my loan was in underwriting. I didn't receive a call or anything but an email stating that Josh, my lender, was dropping the loan, that he went ahead and he closed out the application and denied it. And typically, mortgage loan officers don't have that authority unless they just no longer want to work on it. If they're maybe fired, normally even then at that point, they would pass it on to another loan officer, but that would mean that there would have to be a loan officer in this area, and I'm not sure if there was. But anyway, he was dropping the loan. And in the denial letter, he mentioned the paid collection that I couldn't get removed because of the law that I described earlier, the Fair Credit Reporting Act, and the length of my credit history. Those were the two things that he used to deny my loan. Now, I have been in good standing with my credit and my credit cards, other loans and obligations for longer than my son has been alive, and he is 6. Typically, mortgage lenders take the 2-2-2 rule, which means they evaluate 2 full years of everything, of income, of housing verification, payment history, credit history, and so on. So after receiving this denial, I was obviously frantic, and my intuition told me that this was solely discrimination-based. You know when you just feel it. You have that feeling. Well, my intuition told me, and that's what I felt. It could be because he was fired or left the brokerage and moved to another company and denied all of his loans or the ones he just didn't want to deal with. But men like that do things like this even when their commission is on the line. Narcissistic men will sacrifice their income, their assets, their marriages, even their families for their own internalized vengeance. So it just is what it is. I did not want to miss out on my house, though. I really love my house, this house. My apartment was pretty much fully packed at the time. My son was dead set on moving and starting hockey at the new hockey club that's close to us. And a moving date was already given to the man who owned my rental, since he ended up firing the crazy, dangerous property manager lady for her wild, crazy actions. I decided to call a local credit union that was in the area of my new house and spoke to a loan officer there. Credit unions are quick and they have more leeway when it comes to approval and interest rates. And since the previous lender damaged my credit by repeatedly pulling it, I wanted somewhere that would be a little bit more understanding to my experience and what I just went through, unlike a bank who typically only looks at the numbers. The new loan officer's name was Bobby, and she is the sweetest lady. I told her about my situation, the house I had an offer in on, my experience with my realtor and the previous lender, and told her that I downloaded all of the work that the previous lender did, and I had all of my documentation ready now if she was able to take on my loan. And she did. Oh my God, a lot of tears were shed during this experience. I'll tell you that. So I was really relieved. I thought this is like too good to be true. I was so excited. Anyway, she called in her boss to help her, and together they were able to get everything submitted in that day. They had to do some major calculation changes, and she also noticed on the cross-country loan estimate all of the incorrect calculations that Josh had made, which basically just backed up what I had already told her about my experience. Her and her boss were able to properly calculate things like my income and my debt-to-income ratio, and those figures Bobby had matched my exact calculation. So I knew that she was honest and fair in her work, and that made me feel really comfortable. Working with Bobby made me feel like hopeful for the first time during this entire home buying experience. I couldn't express like how much finding the right partners can truly make a difference. Finances are a really intimate part of your life, and I think it's really important to build a team of people that you trust to assist you in any or all of your money moves. Just like when it comes to finding the right bookkeeper, finding the right realtor and lenders, I just think are also really important. So Bobby had to call Josh for some things, and she mentioned that he was even difficult with her and was trying to basically, I guess, trash talk me to her, which is so unprofessional. One thing I can say about my entire time living in Maine so far is no matter what you do, whether it be buy a home or buy an ice cream, it's always drama. Like, you can't do anything around here without it being just a hassle. So we did have to end up pushing out the closing date because we needed a new appraisal. But when that came back, Bobby called me and she was ecstatic, sharing the news with me that I was already starting with over $50,000 in equity in my home, which is great, obviously. Like, you always want equity in your home, but typically it takes some time to build equity. But with the seller's listing price and the offer that they accepted from me, I was actually starting out with 50,000 and some change. I think it's like 57,000 in equity because my appraisal came back really high, and that was great. And that was, I don't know, she just seemed as happy for me as I was. And with the appraisal, we were able to go ahead and schedule closing. Now, I wasn't able to do a clear to close walkthrough, which is typically a walkthrough that you do of the home when you get that clear to close letter and you have your closing date scheduled. Normally what this does is you just are able to walk through the home again, make sure that the sellers didn't leave anything behind, that everything was cleared out, that all of the appliances that they promised were still in the home. Like your copper pipes aren't missing or like something crazy. But I wasn't able to do that because my realtor wasn't really willing to come up to this area where my house is located. It's about 2 hours away from where she lives. And I personally don't think that's all that far. Like, it is a bit of a trip, but like, I used to drive a lot for work. So I think living out west and driving a lot for my previous career, I just don't think that's that big of a deal. But to other people it must be. So I went to closing alone and blind with only the memories from the home inspection. Now, I feel like I may have blacked out during closing because I barely remember it. I signed and signed and signed with my son by my side as always. Then the attorney at the title company gave me the house keys and the home was ours. We were able to drive through it and get in that day. We have been all moved in and starting the home restoration projects that you might have seen on my shorts feed ever since. And I will be continuing to upload videos to my shorts feed, going over the DIYs, the cost of the DIYs, and just sharing that process with you guys. Now, that's my home buying experience. And in the end, it actually all worked out. I hope that sharing my experience helps others and in the process sheds light that even though I am a finance professional, doesn't mean that I am void of making my own financial mistakes. I just want to keep it real over here. And if you had a bad home buying experience, maybe don't feel so alone. Now, if you have bought a home, how was it? Have you experienced any of the things that I did? Do you feel like you were maybe discriminated against also? And if your home buying process was easy, I want to hear that too. Do you want to hear more of my home buying finance tips? If so, let me know. As always, don't forget to share your thoughts on today's Morning Minute in the comments below and leave a rating and review if you are tuning in on a podcast platform.